It's morning here. I'm not sure where you are, but it's morning here in the Netherlands. Nice weather. My name is Frans Willem Korsten, and next to me is Kiaran Meers, who is an urban studies student and an ambassador. I was involved in organizing this program, and now I have one course. And this is what we're going to do today. So why would you choose urban studies? What is it? Then we get to the student perspective and a program overview, possibilities of careers and so forth, and then there's questions. So if you have a question in the course of our presentation, please write it down. We have a moderator who will be able to send the questions to us, and we hope to solve everything. Okay, urban studies, why? This is a visualization of some of the things happening. Pretty prominent things. This is the urban growth per hour. So if you take a look at Lagos, for instance, that means that 85 or just 85 or 85,000 are coming in Lagos per hour, not as tourists, but to live there. So if you do let's say the statistics on a yearly basis, that becomes massive. And as you can see, it's not just Africa that's growing so fast in terms of urban environments, but also China and India. Actually, at the moment, the biggest migration in human history has been taking place, and is still taking place in China, where we see millions and millions of people, almost a number as big as the European Union inhabitants, go to cities. So this is a very basic reason to opt for urban studies. This is a growing business, literally and figuratively. So there's a rising need to analyze, discuss, and find solutions for the issues arising from expanding cities and rapid urbanization. And there's a lack of professionals that understand cities in a global perspective. That's what we offer in this program. So what is it? Quote by Dejan Surjic: "A city is made by its people within the bounds of the possibilities that it can offer them." That's a good quote, because if you say it's made by the people, yes, but we can't make everything. Large parts of cities are already built. So what affordances do cities offer to the different people living in it or moving through it? The focus in this program is on urban areas and urban issues. And now the more important part is what makes this program specific, which is its interdisciplinarity and the themes that have been chosen. Location, very important, The Hague, which is an economic, political and cultural hub of the Netherlands, and can also be used as a case study. So our students by and large have a foreign background. Half of the students, the rest is coming from the Netherlands, and they don't all come from The Hague. So The Hague is also a good case to study, to go into the city and see what kind of field work you can do. If we say economic, political and cultural hub, I should add, of course, legal hub. This is the center of international legal institutes, as a result of which the populace of The Hague is also pretty international and mixed. Here's a visualization of the center. Now you might think, coming from other universities, that most university centers are somewhere out of the city, slightly green. That's not the case here. This is smack in the middle of The Hague, just a few minutes walking from the central station. New buildings, good facilitations, all great. So there we go. A 3-year bachelor program, English taught, full-time, which means that by and large in a week you have 12 to 16 hours teaching, lecturing, working together, and 20 to 24 hours of self-study. Of course, this is the ideal picture. My guess is that of the hours of self-study, much is also spent on working or having fun, which is also possible. But this is by and large what we expect if you want to do the program within the time that it takes. Lectures and tutorials. Lectures more like lecturing, tutorials more like working together. And then we have this focus on 4 main themes, which are the multicultural city, sustainable city, safe city, healthy city. And let's go through them so that we can have an understanding of what they mean. Multicultural city, it's still a title that covers what we're doing, but we're thinking about perhaps we should give it another title. Because it's not only about, let's say, the many different cultures living in one city. Nowadays, especially in Europe and the USA, but also elsewhere, we talk about hyperdiversity, which means that, let's say, the term multicultural still kind of connotes that there is a few different cultures living together. Well, that might be hundreds by now. Besides, there's also a lot of people moving through the city as tourists. There's by now a lot of cities that count more tourists than inhabitants, which is also part of this multiculturality. The multicultural city connotes also social inequality. It's never the case that these different cultures have the same kinds of jobs, the same kinds of incomes. There's often a coincidence of social inequality and multicultural inequality, the difference. Then we can not deny that there's not only nice things going on if we talk about multiculturality. There is. People love to live together with different people, and at the same time they at points want to live together with their own people. So there's also clashes and tensions and debates. Of course, cities become pools of language. This is just one visualization of it. But for instance, nowadays, for instance in the Netherlands, you can hear so many languages if you walk the street. English, of course, the international lingua franca, the language that most of us speak. But still, enormous complexity also there in terms of communication, how to reach people. And then there's art to look at. So cultural does not only connote the different cultures people have, but the way in which people express themselves through art. So here's an example of one painting on a wall, very famous. But it might also involve literature or movies and so forth. Sustainable city, perhaps one of the most vexing ones nowadays, although all the problems that we're dealing with, all the themes are deeply connected. But this has become, let's say, a hot topic, literally and figuratively speaking, a hot topic. So we're looking at how do cities contribute to energy transition? What would we need for cities to become, let's say, greener, which would mean less hot. At the moment, many urban environments are heat islands. So how can we kind of mix natural elements with urban elements? And of course, what's called the Anthropocene. It's a term that's also been criticized because people say it's not just human beings who've done this, it's specific areas who've caused this, which would be Europe and the United States. That's where it all starts. Now, of course, there's this global development, but still. So there's also people criticizing that concept. And that's also telling something about the program. We don't just kind of follow what's been said, we also have we try to adopt a critical attitude. Circular economy, didn't mention that yet. How can we not just produce enormous amounts of garbage, but how can we circulate it? That's theme 2 then. The safe city. Also a hot topic. Perhaps Kiaran can tell a little more about it. It's, in a sense, one of my favorites, and it's not, because I think if we talk about the safe city, the first and foremost question is always, whose safety is at stake then? And what do we do to make it safe? Do we make cities more socially equal? So in my analysis of things, most crime is not caused by the fact that people are bad, but by the fact that there's social inequality that's too tough to bear. So we're looking at asocial behavior, urban crime, of course, gated communities, fear of crime. How can new forms of technology make the city safer, smart cities? I would say they can also make cities unsafe if you have a certain political system that even if you're innocent wants to target you. Citizens' initiatives. So let's say these are a couple of the things I'd love to add here. Perhaps I'll do that next year. Social inequality, but that will be for next year then. And a healthy city. Here as well. Social inequality is basic. Most people who are not living healthy also live in poor parts of the city, don't have enough money to spend on healthy food, are culturally not trained to use healthy food, so It's looking at stress, isolation, addiction, how it has social implications, how it vectorizes people's behaviors. Of course, healthcare is becoming more and more expensive. By now in the Netherlands, 1 in 6 laborers is involved in healthcare. And if it keeps on growing like this, we are going to move towards 1 in 4 or 1 in 3. Sounds good if we can pay for that, but I don't think we'll be able to pay for it. So this is a very important as a theme as well, in terms of how are people helped to become healthy, how our urban environments make it almost impossible to be healthy, that kind of stuff. So what sets it apart from other BA programs? Fully English, international classroom. It's a BA program, which means that it has its basis in the humanities. So it's not the case that all the themes and all the courses are humanities based, but the core program has this humanities aura, so to speak. Academic program at the research university. So Leiden University has organized itself on the basis of institutes that put research on up front. So you're going to be taught to become an academic, but with the skills to go out in the wild world after you've done your BA, or to follow an MA program. Not a technical or design-focused program. That's very important. So we're not learning you here how to design, let's say, buildings or infrastructures of cities. We have a more analytical approach. We train you to become more and more sensible about the enormous complexities of issues in urban environments and how they relate to one another. And now I give the floor to Kieran Meers, who will be talking about his perspective on this program. Kieran, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Kieran, and I'm currently the student ambassador for Urban Studies. I come from a town in Ireland called Cork. I'm American originally, and I've always been quite interested in what makes cities tick. So growing up in Cork, even just looking around, I had a lot of different questions about the city. Some of them positive, some of them not so positive. I was constantly wondering, why is the bus late? Why are there so many derelict buildings in the city center? Why is the crime higher in my neighborhood as opposed to my best friend's neighborhood? So when I came across Urban Studies, I found it to be a program that would give me the tools to answer a lot of these questions, to be able to analyze a lot of the urban challenges that I came across in my day-to-day with well thought out, researched answers, and to be able to broaden and deepen my understanding of a lot of different urban topics. So I'm here today to tell you a small bit about how I found the program and a few other things that I think make Urban Studies a very nice program indeed. There's a reason that it's one of the fastest growing programs at Leiden University. So Urban Studies is taught in The Hague, and The Hague is an excellent place for such a program to be located. It's quite interesting to be able to see urban processes unfold outside of the classroom, and then you come in and learn about them inside. It's a city renowned internationally for being the city of peace and justice, I believe, which means that it's also very interesting to be learning about different things that happen within the city, both from a policing and justice perspective, as we've kind of mentioned in the Safe City, but also seeing the different kind of urban processes and renewals that happen within the city. As I'll talk about slightly later, one of the more interesting things that The Hague is able to play a welcome environment to is our understanding of a lot of things within sustainability and sustainability-related topics. So just as a bit of an example, there's one area of The Hague, the Binkhorst, which is set to be part of the biggest redevelopment within the general Hague region. Over the next few years, it is going to play host to 50,000 different new homes. So it's quite interesting to be able to learn in the classroom about how we can do this more sustainably, how we can reuse existing buildings within the area and ensure that we cut down on our overuse of certain materials. So I chose Urban Studies for a few reasons. One of the big appeal for me was looking at both the interaction between people and the city that they live in. So cities shape a lot of kind of different interaction between people. Everything from the urban design of cities, meaning that people feel more or less safe on the street or in their homes, as well as a lot of the other human-related topics in cities. How language is used in cities is particularly interesting to me coming from Ireland, where we use English as the lingua franca, as the main language, but Irish is technically language number one within law and justice and our constitution. So being able to see how different people use language within cities is also quite interesting to me. One thing that I also quite liked was the fact that the program looks at everything from a very broad perspective. With a lot of different programs, you say may sign up for an architecture bachelor's and you learn solely about that, but that wasn't exactly the most appealing to me. Instead, I liked being able to look at cities and the interesting people who live in them from a variety of different perspectives, learning about everything from psychology in urban areas to the economics of cities to how diversity occurs in many different forms within urban areas. One other very nice thing about urban studies is that it is a really international classroom. So as you can see on the graphs here, currently 60% of our first year students come from places other than the Netherlands. And it's really interesting, especially when we look at different, case studies in tutorials, that people are able to bring a really international perspective to what we're learning. So for instance, in one work group, you may have been looking at, say, the safe city and how, just as an example, New York engages in different policies to ensure that the city is safer. So it's quite interesting that someone from Canberra can chime in and say, oh yes, we tried that, but it didn't work. And then someone from Rio de Janeiro is able to say, oh, we tried that, but it did work because of this slightly different reason. And then people from a wide variety of different backgrounds are able to chime in and contribute to this very large and diverse pool of knowledge that everyone shares together. So this is what our schedule is. So on an average week, we will have about 10 to 12 hours of contact, usually comprised of 1 2-hour lecture every day in one of 5 different modules. As well, we also have 4 tutorials per course per semester. These can vary from week to week. So say one week you may have 1 tutorial and then the next you may have 3. These are quite different from lectures in that lectures are a wider classroom of, say, 90 individuals learning from a lecture in a typical lecture format, whereas tutorials break us up into smaller groups of maybe 12 or 15, in which we engage with the material from a lecture in a more focused and specific way. So for example, within looking at urban diversity, we may be examining, say, different uses of language in urban areas in our lecture, but then in the tutorial we take a case study of that and look at the very specifics of how language is used in specific ways. So say we had one tutorial looking at the use of straattaal, Dutch street language, within the city of Gouda. And it's quite interesting to be able to dive into this in quite a more deep way. We also have a few methodology courses as well. So for instance, in your first semester of first year, you have academic writing and presenting, which helps you to learn how best to engage in academic research and how to better your own academic writing skills as well. So urban studies might be for you if you are really interested in cities and all of the very interesting things that happen within them, the problems that cities face, but also the opportunities for addressing large problems going forward. Many countries and many cities across the world are trying their best to fight climate change. Cities can be a very useful tool in a country's arsenal to try and combat one of the biggest problems that we are facing. And there's also great opportunities. So for instance, a lot of cities are also facing housing crises. In what ways, for instance, can we look at cities and urban housing in different ways to be able to tackle this problem? Urban studies might be for you if you like thinking about these problems critically from a wide variety of different angles and different disciplines. Of course, if you like reading and if you're confident in English, this might just be the program for you. I'll give the floor back to you there.
Thanks. Cork. Isn't that one of the cities that suffers from problems with water?
Exactly. Cork is built on a floodplain. The very name Cork comes from the Irish Kirkig, which means marsh. It's a bit of nominative determinism almost.
Yeah, right. So one of these cities that, like Venice, Jakarta, is having almost monthly problems, right?
Oh yes, flooding gets quite bad sometimes. It's not uncommon for the entire city centre to flood a small bit. What is actually quite funny is Cork is known as a city with a very big ego, and everyone from Cork has never ever undersold the city. So back in the late 1800s, there was actually a pamphlet promoting Cork, in which it referred to Venice as the Cork of Italy.
Okay, that was just one of the problems that we are dealing with here. So there's more and more cities sinking or being troubled by water. That concerns hundreds of millions of people by now. Okay, so this is the program overview. Year one, Kjaran already kind of explained a lot, so I'm not going to repeat that. Perhaps this would also be something for the questions. So we have, let's say, already introduction of all the themes that you're going to be able to choose in the second year. And we have, let's say, skills. Let's say how to do research, how to present your research, how to do research in terms of different methodologies, also philosophically underpinned. That's the first year program. It's a really broad introduction into all the different themes that we're going to deal with. That's the basis then. So knowledge and methodology. Year two, same thing, knowledge and methodology, but here you're going to have to choose one of the themes. So that's free. And there's actually also, let's say, flexibility in choice. It's not, let's say, pre-programmed. In terms of the methodology, we deepen the things that we've been doing in the first year. There is a course called Professional Orientation. I'm not sure whether that course will survive the evaluations, but anyway, it is important to look ahead and think through what can we do with this knowledge and the methods that we've learned here. So that's the themes year. And then in the third year, you're going to specialize, also with the option of studying abroad. So that would be nice, not in the first year, but from the second year onwards to start to look around. In the second semester, you'll learn how to set up a project, how to base that project, underpin it with the relevant literature, and to write your thesis, which is a 15 EC thesis. It's not that big. But students, of course, often tend to think still about theses as this massive thing. We're looking at the moment at ways to diversify the thesis, not just to make it the 19th century written paper of such and such amounts of words, but also to bring in visualizations, but that's a work in progress, so to speak. So, specialization in your elective credits. So if you do a minor, you'd have to do a structured package of courses. It's not just that you can do anything in the third year, that's where you have to really choose. Also involves then if you go abroad, it needs to be a cohesive package, not just kind of cherry picking. And there's the possibility of doing an internship, which would be probably in the Netherlands, to do research and to gain valuable work experience or kind of knowledge and practice here. So minors could be looked for at Leiden University. There's an enormous amount of, we just started a couple of new minors in The Hague as well. For instance, I'm involved in looking at how art and literature relate to law and justice, which is of course not the strange thing to do in The Hague. But there's many others also looking at, for instance, disinformation, which has become an enormously important topic. Nearby is the TU Delft Technical University, Erasmus University Rotterdam, Amsterdam Academy of Architecture, another university in Amsterdam, Vrije Universiteit. And then abroad you could go to the UK, Sweden, Melbourne, many others. So look around and see what interests you, keeping in mind that it has to be a cohesive package. In terms of internships, we have a growing number of organizations whom we know, where we can, let's say, lead you to or introduce you. So these are all, let's say, institutes that work with aspects of urban environment, mostly in the Netherlands. But here as well, you could check the possibility of doing an internship elsewhere. Belgium is very interesting, for instance, and nearby. But that's the internship. So what happens after? This is what you're supposed to have learned during the program. So you have knowledge and skills, you have some work experience, you have been meeting other people, as a result of which you have some sort of a network. And then you can either choose for a master or research master, or say after the BA, I'm going to I'm ready to go into the wild world and get a job and use my knowledge. I think by and large most students still opt for doing a master somewhere. These are possible masters in the Netherlands and elsewhere. So let's say, for instance, if you would do safety and specialize yourself in that, you could go to the University of Utrecht. Leiden has a program on this, 3 programs even. Keep in mind that if you write your thesis, it will have a focal point, like safety, but it has to relate itself to one of the other themes. So yes, you'll have a focal point, but you are related to other fields, which is also why you could go for an MA program, sustainability, here as well in Leiden possibilities, or health in Utrecht. Leiden University has a beautiful program in multicultural problems, as does Erasmus, and then more generally urbanism, European universities, Denmark, London. So here as well, have a look around. There's much more than what we offer here. And it would be wise not to start doing this after your thesis, but before your thesis, because as I've just suggested, the topic of your thesis relates to what you're going to do afterwards. Well, there's more examples. I believe the PowerPoint will be online as well, or is to be found online, so I'm not going to repeat everything we see here. It's just to show that there's such an enormous amount of possibilities. Then future prospects. One of the questions you always get from aunts and uncles. So, once you've done this, what can you do with it? Well, you could become an urban planner, a sociologist, urban development specialist, analyst, researcher. And again, related to the 4 different themes, right? So, if you would have worked on the sustainable city, you'll probably know more about circular economy, industrial ecologist. You can become a consultant or a policy advisor. You can become project coordinator. Here as well, all these different possibilities are not just kind of, let's say, connected to a sort of tailoring that you would precisely kind of move towards that. I think in a sense, it would be possible to go through another theme on the basis of your skills and your knowledge. By and large, we know by now that if you're academically trained, there's a lot of things you can do that don't necessarily belong to the specifics that you were trained in. You've become a critical researcher, and you can use these skills in many areas. Application deadlines, are they that tough?
Yeah, they're pretty strict on actually replying before the deadline.
So what happens if you're late?
In which case, we'll see you in 2024, not 2023.
Thanks. It's that tough. So please keep these in mind. Study choice check is for Dutch students 1st of May 2023. For international students, you need a visa, a residency permit or accommodation via Leiden University Housing Office. Would be nice to have that before kind of entering the program. And you'll get a yes on the 1st of April 2023 and a no on the 15th of June 2023. More information, so you could go to the Experience Day. I'm not sure whether the Experience Day also has an online program, does it?
I don't believe there is an online component.
No. Would be something to think about, but I don't think that's realized yet. No. Something for next year. You can also be student for a day, then you just kind of come to one of the classes or one of the days and you follow what the students are doing. And the online experience in June is a little later, of course, but is that June? Should be, right? But then you're already inscribed, I'd say.
Yeah. Possibly before that.
Okay, good, yeah. But more important, if you have questions like these, email the student ambassador or check the chat at the bottom of our program page. And for now, I think we are ready for questions, moderator Stijn. Okay, I'll read the question so that everyone can see it. Is this the first one, Stijn? Okay, good. Since the world map is down due to maintenance, I'm curious as to what destinations are available for urban studies students to studying abroad. Does the university have any partnerships with universities in China, Taiwan or Singapore? No, not at the moment. So this is a program that started 4 years ago, and we're expanding on our network as we go. But at the moment there are no official partnerships with university in China, Taiwan or Singapore. But of course, it's almost always the case that students start to make a reality in the sense that they choose for something, and then we think, okay, perhaps then it would be wise to have a partnership with that university. Hope that answers your question, Marta. I'm interested in urban planning and urbanism, and most master's programs and employers ask for some scientific skills, such as mathematics or even a degree of architecture. Would the urban studies program provide a pathway towards that? I think you can answer that question.
Yeah, so a lot of master's programs will require, say, 30 electoral credits in some kind of related mathematical discipline. So you do some of that through the statistical electives that you can choose in second year. But also, one of the great things is that because there is the opportunity to pursue a minor, it means that if you have your heart set on a specific master program, you can choose a minor that will help you bridge the gap. So if you want to pursue, say, a master's in architecture, then you can choose a minor in a related discipline that will give you the electoral credits that you need in order to get accepted.
Yep. And I repeat, the Netherlands are a small country. Everything is really nearby. So Delft is just 15 minutes by train. And Delft is the technical university in the Netherlands doing architecture. So that's really nearby, and they have possibilities to do a minor there. Jean asks, what advantages does studying in The Hague specifically offer?
So we have lots of nice, shiny new buildings there that are very nice. But as in terms of urban environment, The Hague is a really interesting case study. And I think that's quite exemplified by the fact we often have a lot of tutorials where we go outside and we look at urban processes within The Hague. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the development of new housing in the one specific area of The Hague is something that is quite interesting. But we also have other kind of academic excursions looking at, say, use of transportation modes in The Hague, looking at homelessness within the city, and a few other interesting topics as well. Of course, if you are looking for something slightly less academic, The Hague is a very nice city in and of itself. There's lots of green areas, it's very easy to get around, there's an excellent tram system, a metro, and because it's the Netherlands, very easy to bike everywhere. And there's also a beach, massive forest, shopping district, you name it, The Hague has it.
Well, perhaps one more thing. The Hague has a lot of new programs, relatively new. So let's say this started about 10 years ago. So what The Hague at the moment offers is the tradition of Leiden, starting new departments in The Hague. So it's also, let's say, a place where you come in contact with the oldest university of the Netherlands in its newest developments. Okay. After urban studies, are there possibilities to go into secondary geography teaching? Asks Lorenzo. I wouldn't know why not, but here as well, I think the best answer would be that you'd have to relate this to the minor that you're doing. So clearly, as I have said a couple of times, we don't train you to become specifically this or that. It's a multidisciplinary program that introduces you in different fields, with a focus, but let's say your question I think could best be answered by connecting it to a minor that you can choose yourself. Even kijken. We already did this one, yeah. And Jan also asks, how safe is The Hague to live in? I think The Hague is one of the safest cities in the Netherlands. Which might be due, of course, to the fact that it has this, that it is this political hub and legal hub, and is a pretty wealthy city as well. Did you ever experience anything unsafe?
Not in The Hague, no.
No.
Well, aside from bike theft, I had one bike that was stolen from me, but I think that's just part of the Dutch experience, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel very comfortable walking around The Hague, any time of day. I've walked from the train station back to my house at 2 a.m. and felt completely safe. So yes, all in all, I think the least safe part of The Hague is safer than the most safe part of Ireland.
Okay, thanks. Do many students take more than 3 years to graduate? And how competitive is the program overall? That's the question by Marta. I think most of our students graduate within the 3 years. There might be a slight, let's say, stretch, but not much. It's a doable program. How competitive is the program overall? I think we're talking more and more within the organization, within the university, about what's doable for students. So competition sounds nice, but also can produce a lot of stress. And actually, we're not that fond of stress anymore. So we're looking for a doable program that trains you on a high level, and competition is always part of the game, but perhaps it's more important to be able to work together, which concerns students, but also the relation between students and staff.
And there are a lot of resources for help as well within the program if you need it. When you join in first year, you and a bunch of other students are assigned a student mentor, which is really useful to have a point of contact who has gone through, say, first year and part of second year before. And they're always willing to give you study tips, give you their notes from last year, or even just kind of chill and chat a small bit if you aren't making any friends and you want someone to talk to. There's also a bunch of other kind of different anti-stress measures. We have a student association, ASTUS, which puts on a lot of extracurricular activities like additional lectures and other social events. So it's quite nice to be able to meet different people within your program outside of the classroom.
That's it, moderator. Lovely. So perhaps this is where it stops then, right? I'm checking. Yes, it's time to stop. So thank you for being here, and thank you for asking the questions. And then perhaps